My dad kicked me off the $26,000 Dubai trip I paid for, just so he could give my seat to my brother's freeloading fiancée. He said she deserves it more. Big mistake. I made sure they'd never forget what happened next. Okay, listen to this because it's a story that still leaves a knot in my stomach. Can you imagine pouring your heart and soul, and nearly $26,000, into planning the ultimate dream vacation for your family, only for your own father to call you up and brutally tell you that you're not welcome? Not just unwelcome, but replaced by your brother's new, manipulative fiancé on a trip you paid for. It was a gut punch, a betrayal so deep it changed everything. My name is Alexandra, I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the independent one, the hardworking one, the one who always showed up for family. I've spent the last decade clawing my way up the corporate ladder, now a senior financial manager in Chicago. I own my home, my student loans are paid off, and I'm proud of building something for myself. It wasn't handed to me. My dad, John, is a 62-year-old retired military officer. Our household always ran like his platoon. Strict rules, high expectations. His approval? It was like gold dust, something I desperately sought but almost never received. My mom, Diane, 60, was the family peacekeeper. She rarely contradicted my dad, usually just going along with whatever he decided, even when you could tell she disagreed. Their marriage was traditional, his word was law. Then there's my older brother, Michael. He's 35, and honestly, he's never quite found his footing. Dropped out of college twice, bounced between sales jobs, never held one for more than a year. But despite all that, my parents, especially my dad, treated him like the golden child. Michael could do no wrong. If he barely passed a class, Dad would praise him. If I got all A's except one B, Dad would question why I couldn't get a perfect report card. The unfairness was stark. It continued into adulthood. Michael needed money to pay off credit card debt after a spontaneous trip to Vegas. Mom and Dad dipped into their retirement savings to bail him out. I needed a small loan for an unexpected medical bill right out of college. Dad lectured me about financial responsibility and told me to figure it out myself. And I did. I worked extra shifts, ate ramen for a month. That disparity hurt deeply, but I learned to live with it. I focused on building my own life, becoming financially independent as fast as I could. I put myself through college and grad school with loans and part-time jobs while my parents funded Michael's multiple failed attempts at higher education. Even with the uneven treatment, I tried to stay close. Sunday dinners, regular calls. I wanted to be the daughter they were proud of, even if they rarely said it. As my career grew, so did their view of me. I became a resource. When their roof needed replacing 2 years ago, Dad called. I contributed $8,000. When Michael was between jobs last year, Mom hinted he was struggling with rent. I sent him $2,000. He never acknowledged it. Never said thank you. It was around that time Michael started dating Natalie. She's 28, works part-time at a boutique, but from what Michael shared, she called in sick more often than she showed up. The moment I met her, something felt off. She was polite, yes, but there was a pure calculation behind her smile that made me instantly uneasy. She quickly identified who held the purse strings in our family. Within weeks, she was calling my parents Mom and Dad, spending more time at their house than her own apartment. She'd gush over Mom's cooking, listen to Dad's military stories with rapt attention, asking questions that perfectly stroked his ego. With me, though, she was different. When she found out what I did for a living, her eyes lit up with a look I'd seen too many times. That hungry gleam people get when they realize you have money and start mentally calculating what they can get from you. She started asking pointed questions about my salary, my home, my vacation habits. When I stayed vague, her interest in building any real relationship with me noticeably cooled. She wormed her way into every family gathering. If I planned dinner with my parents, suddenly Michael and Natalie would join. If I tried to get one-on-one time with Mom, Natalie would coincidentally drop by with some small gift or an urgent question. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just wanted a family. But the more time passed, the clearer the pattern became. Natalie was only interested in the material benefits of being connected to us. She commented on Mom's jewelry, hinted she'd always wanted similar pieces. She admired Dad's car, then mentioned Michael had promised to buy her one someday, looking pointedly at Dad as she said it. Michael, poor infatuated Michael, seemed oblivious. He hung on her every word, going out of his way to please her. He started buying her expensive gifts despite his precarious financial situation. When I gently asked where the money was coming from, he vaguely mentioned side gigs and changed the subject. I suspected Mom and Dad were funding his newfound generosity, but I bit my tongue. Despite my reservations about Natalie, I still loved my brother. I still wanted a relationship with him. And despite years of uneven treatment, I still deeply cared for my parents. I wanted to do something special, something truly grand, to show my appreciation. That's when the idea for the Dubai trip hit me. I was reviewing travel expenses for executives at work when it clicked. Mom and Dad's 40th wedding anniversary was coming up. 40 years. That deserved an incredible celebration. They'd never traveled outside the US. Dad always said international travel was too expensive, too complicated. Mom occasionally wished for it, but never pushed. I wanted to give them an experience they'd never forget, something utterly different from their suburban Illinois lives. Dubai was perfect. Luxury, culture, architectural marvels, desert adventures. I pictured them in front of the Burj Khalifa, riding camels, memories they'd treasure forever. I started researching immediately. Lunch breaks, evenings, meticulously mapping out the perfect itinerary. Everything had to be first class, a true once-in-a-lifetime journey. 5-star hotels, private desert safaris, exclusive dining, VIP access everywhere. I decided to include Michael too. Despite our differences, he was their son. They'd want him there. The total cost was staggering. Nearly $26,000 for the 4 of us. It would take almost my entire annual bonus and a significant chunk of my savings. But I decided it was worth it. I set up a separate savings account, took on extra projects for bonuses, and cut back everywhere. No Starbucks, packed lunches, postponed my kitchen renovation. For 18 months, I methodically saved and planned. I booked first-class Emirates flights, reserved rooms at the Burj Al Arab, one of the most luxurious hotels in the world, arranged a private desert dinner with traditional entertainment, a guided tour of the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, a private yacht cruise around the Palm Jumeirah, VIP access to the Burj Khalifa observation deck. I even scheduled a private shopping experience at the Dubai Mall with a personal stylist. Every booking, every payment filled me with joy. I imagined my mom's face, my dad enjoying the culture he'd seen only through military deployments. I even hoped this shared adventure might bridge the distance with Michael. When everything was finally arranged, I presented the trip to my family during a Sunday dinner. I'd made elaborate, gold-embossed invitation cards and placed them by their dessert plates. Mom opened hers first, her hands trembling. She looked up, tears in her eyes. "Alexandra, is this real?" she whispered. I nodded, smiling. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I wanted to do something special." Dad studied a furrowed brow, looking for the catch. "This must have cost a fortune," he said. "Don't worry," I assured him. "It's my gift. You both deserve it." Michael's eyes were wide. "First-class flights? The Burj Al Arab? Are you serious, Alex?" "Completely," I confirmed. "We leave in 6 months. I've cleared my time. Even talked to your boss, Michael. Everything's arranged." Mom got up and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is the most wonderful gift." Even Dad seemed moved in his reserved way. "Very generous of you, Alexandra." "Thank you." It was one of those rare moments where I felt truly appreciated, especially by him. The genuine gratitude in his eyes made every sacrifice worth it. But that moment was shattered by the doorbell. Mom answered and returned with Natalie. She decided to surprise Michael for dessert, though I suspected Michael had texted her. "Hope you don't mind me crashing," she chirped, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Michael mentioned your mom's famous apple pie." She saw the invitations, her eyebrow raised. "What's this? Are we celebrating?" Michael quickly explained, his voice bubbling with excitement, detailing all the luxurious elements I'd planned. Natalie's expression transformed. Her eyes widened, a smile spread. "Dubai. Oh my God, that sounds amazing!" she exclaimed, looking at Michael's invitation with naked envy. "I've always wanted to go there. All those Instagram influencers are always posting from Dubai. The shopping there is supposed to be incredible." I noticed her emphasis on Instagram, and could already picture her plotting content. A cold chill ran down my spine, but I reminded myself, she wasn't invited. Not my problem. Throughout dessert, Natalie peppered me with questions. How long? What attractions? Shopping time? Special experiences? With each answer, her expression grew more intense, a mixture of longing and calculation that set off every warning bell. As I prepared to leave, she gave me an uncomfortably tight hug. "You're so generous, Alexandra," she purred. "Michael is lucky to have such a caring sister." Her tone was disingenuous. I smiled politely, but as I drove home, a vague sense of unease settled over me. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention. It was the first sign of the trouble to come. 2 months before our departure, Michael called. He and Natalie were engaged. He'd proposed during a trip to Lake Michigan with a diamond ring I later learned was bought with money borrowed from our parents. "That's wonderful news, Michael," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic despite my concerns. "Thanks, sis," he replied, genuinely excited. "Mom cried and Dad actually hugged me. Can you believe it? They're having us over for dinner this Sunday to celebrate. You'll come, right?" I agreed, though my doubts about Natalie, her motives, whether she truly cared for Michael or just saw him as a meal ticket, were growing. That Sunday, I arrived at my parents' with a nice bottle of champagne. I wasn't ready to emotionally or financially invest in a relationship I had so many doubts about. The house was in full celebration mode. Mom had prepared a feast. Dad bought flowers. Michael and Natalie sat in the living room accepting congratulations like visiting royalty. Natalie was showing off her ring. "Alexandra!" she shrieked, jumping up to embrace me. "I'm so glad you made it. Look at my ring. Isn't it gorgeous? Michael did so well." I admired it politely. At least 2 carats, well beyond Michael's means. My suspicions were confirmed when I noticed Mom wearing costume jewelry instead of her usual gold pieces. She'd likely pawned some to help Michael buy that ring. During dinner, the conversation, inevitably, turned to Dubai, now just 8 weeks away. Natalie leaned forward eagerly as Mom discussed packing. "I've been researching Dubai fashion," Natalie interjected. "For the desert safari, you'll want light layers because it gets cold at night. And for the Burj Al Arab, we should definitely dress up. I was thinking of wearing my new red dress, the one with the gold accents." Her casual use of "we" set off immediate alarm bells. I glanced at Michael, who was studiously avoiding my gaze. Dad was nodding along, seemingly unfazed by her presumption. I cleared my throat. "Natalie, I'm not sure if Michael explained, but the trip is for our parents' anniversary. I made reservations for 4 people: Mom, Dad, Michael, and myself." A heavy silence fell over the table. Natalie's smile froze. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. Dad set down his fork with a deliberate clink that I recognized as a warning from childhood. "Alexandra," he said slowly, "now that Michael and Natalie are engaged, don't you think it would be appropriate to include her in our family celebration?" My stomach clenched. "Dad, I'd love to include Natalie, but the trip has been planned and paid for with 4 people in mind. All the reservations, the hotel rooms, the private tours, everything is arranged for 4. Adding a 5th person at this stage would be complicated and extremely expensive." "Surely you could make some adjustments," my father pressed. "Natalie is going to be part of our family now." Mom, who had been silent, tentatively spoke up. "The trip is Alexandra's gift to us, John. She's put a lot of thought and money into planning it." I shot her a grateful look, but Dad waved her comment away. "Alexandra is doing very well in her career. I'm sure the additional cost wouldn't be a burden for her." Michael finally looked up from his plate. "Natalie has never been out of the country before. She doesn't even have a passport yet, but we're expediting it. This would be such an amazing first international experience for her." Natalie reached over and squeezed Dad's hand. "I would never want to impose, John. It's just that Michael has told me so much about this trip, and it sounds like such a special family time. I would love to be included, but I completely understand if it's not possible." Her tone was conciliatory, but her expression conveyed a different message entirely, a chilling pronouncement. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. The issue isn't just the additional cost, though that's certainly a factor. The Burj Al Arab suites are configured for specific numbers of guests. The desert dinner is a private booking for 4. The first-class airfare alone for another person would be over $5,000 at this point. And that's if we can even get a seat on the same flights. So you're saying no? Dad's voice had an edge to it. I'm saying it would be very difficult to change everything at this point, I clarified. Maybe Natalie and Michael can plan their own trip to Dubai after the wedding. I'd be happy to share my research and recommendations. That's very generous of you, Alexandra, Natalie said with a tight smile. But it wouldn't be the same as experiencing it together as a family, especially for such a special occasion. Dad nodded in agreement. Family should be together for important celebrations. The irony of my father suddenly emphasizing family togetherness when it benefited Natalie was not lost on me. But I bit my tongue. This was supposed to be a happy occasion, celebrating Michael's engagement, not the time for a confrontation about decades of favoritism. Let me look into the options, I conceded, though I had no intention of spending thousands more to include someone I was increasingly certain was using my brother and parents for her own gain. The rest of dinner was thick with tension. When it was time to leave, Dad walked me to the door, his expression serious. Alexandra, I hope you will make the right decision about this trip, he said, his tone making it clear what he considered the right decision. I'll do my best, Dad, I replied noncommittally. As I drove home, a sense of dread settled over me. I had a feeling this issue was far from resolved. I was right. It was only the beginning of a situation that would ultimately test the bounds of my relationship with my entire family. A month before our scheduled departure, my father called. We need to talk about the trip, he said, his tone uncharacteristically careful. Can you come by around 6 tonight? I agreed, a sinking feeling in my stomach. I hadn't heard much about the trip recently, which was suspicious given their initial excitement. My attempts to confirm details with my parents had been met with vague responses and subject changes. When I arrived that evening, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Mom opened the door, but could barely meet my eyes. In the living room, Dad sat in his favorite armchair, rigid. Michael was on the couch, and beside him, looking surprisingly comfortable, sat Natalie. Alexandra, have a seat, Dad said, gesturing to a lone chair across from him. I felt like I was about to face a firing squad. I sat, my heart pounding. What's going on? Dad cleared his throat. We've been doing some thinking about the Dubai trip, and we've made a decision. The we did not escape my notice. This was my gift to them, yet they were making decisions without me. Your mother and I believe that since Natalie is going to be joining our family, this anniversary trip would be a perfect opportunity for us all to bond and create memories together. I nodded slowly, having expected this. As I mentioned before, adding another person would be complicated, but not impossible. If you all feel strongly about it, I can look into the additional costs and see what changes need to be made. That's not quite what we had in mind, Dad continued, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Given the limitations you mentioned about the reservations being for 4 people, we think the most sensible solution is for Natalie to take your place on the trip. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my father, certain I had misheard him. Excuse me. It makes the most sense, he pressed on, his voice taking on that authoritative tone that expected no argument. You've traveled internationally before. Natalie never has. This would be a new experience for her, whereas for you, it would just be another trip. I felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Mom was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Michael had the decency to look somewhat ashamed, though not enough to speak up. Natalie sat with a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing at her lips, her expression one of poorly concealed triumph. Dad, I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I paid for this trip. I planned every detail. This was my gift to you and Mom for your anniversary. And we appreciate that, he replied quickly. But gifts once given belong to the recipient. Your mother and I would like to share this experience with our son and his future wife. The casual cruelty of his statement left me breathless. I looked to Mom, hoping for support, but she remained silent, her eyes downcast. Natalie deserves to go more than you do, my father added, delivering the most painful blow yet. She's about to become part of this family. This trip would mean so much more to her than it would to you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I've been planning this for over 1.5 years. I worked extra hours, gave up my own vacation plans, and spent nearly $26,000 to create this experience for our family. "And we'll pay you back for your portion," my father said dismissively, as if that addressed the core issue. "Michael has calculated that your share would be around $6,000. We can write you a check right now." I laughed incredulously. $6,000, Dad? The first-class airfare alone is more than that per person, not to mention the hotel suites, the private tours, the special experiences I arranged. Michael finally spoke up. "Alex, don't be selfish about this. Family helps family, you know. Natalie and I can't afford a trip like this on our own. You have a great job and can go to Dubai anytime you want." "Selfish," I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I spent my own money I worked hard for, to give our parents a special anniversary gift. How exactly does that make me selfish?" "It's selfish to deny Natalie this opportunity just because you want to go." Michael shot back. "You always have to be the center of attention. You're always showing off how successful you are, how much money you make." His words were so hypocritical, so completely divorced from reality, that for a moment I couldn't even respond. I had spent years quietly supporting this family, receiving little recognition and even less gratitude, and now I was being accused of showing off. "Michael, I have never, Alexandra." My father cut in, his tone making it clear he considered the matter settled. "Our decision is final. Natalie will be going in your place. We can discuss the financial details later if you are unhappy with the amount we have offered." Natalie, who had been watching this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction, finally spoke. "Alexandra, I want you to know how much this means to me. I never had the opportunity to travel growing up, and sharing this experience with Michael and my future in-laws is something I will cherish forever. I'm so grateful to be included in such a special family moment." Her performance was flawless, her eyes wide with feigned sincerity. I could almost believe she meant it, if not for the smug smile she couldn't quite suppress. Mom finally looked up, her expression pained. "Alexandra, it's fine, Mom," I interrupted, unable to bear hearing her make excuses for this betrayal. "I understand exactly what's happening here." I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. "I hope you all enjoy the trip. It's a gift, after all, and apparently, gifts once given belong to the recipient to do with as they please." "Don't be dramatic, Alexandra," my father said with a frown. "This is a practical solution to a simple problem." "There was no problem until you created one," I replied, finding my voice again. "The problem is that you have always treated Michael differently than me. The problem is that you see nothing wrong with taking something I worked hard for and giving it to someone else because you think they deserve it more. The problem is that I am supposedly part of this family too, but I am being pushed aside the moment someone new comes along." My father's expression hardened. "That is enough. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home." "Fine," I said, grabbing my purse. "Then I will leave." As I headed for the door, Natalie called after me. "Alexandra, please don't leave angry. We're going to be sisters soon. I'd hate for this to come between us." I turned back to look at her, at all of them. "You know what, Natalie? We are not going to be sisters. You may marry my brother. You may charm my parents. But you and I will never be family. Not after this." I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. In my car, I finally allowed the tears to fall. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. The betrayal cut deep, not just from my father, whose favoritism I had long ago accepted, but from my mother, who had always at least pretended to love us equally. Even from Michael, who despite our differences was still my brother, the person who had shared my childhood and who should have understood what this meant to me. As I drove home, my sadness began to give way to anger. I had spent thousands of dollars, countless hours planning, and made numerous personal sacrifices to create this special experience. And with a single conversation, it had been ripped from me and given to someone who had done nothing to earn it. Someone who was clearly using my family for her own benefit. By the time I reached my house, a steely resolve had hardened within me. I may have been removed from the trip, but I still had control over the reservations. And if my family thought they could treat me this way without consequences, they were about to learn a very expensive lesson. I spent that night crying until I had no tears left. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, a hollow ache in my chest with every breath. Around midnight, I called my best friend, Sarah, who answered despite the late hour. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained. "Your own father kicked you off a trip that you paid for, and they expect you to just accept that." "Apparently," I said, my voice hoarse. "My dad actually said Natalie deserves to go more than I do. After everything I've done for them over the years, after all the times I've helped them, financially, this is how they treat me. Alex, I love you, but you have got to stop letting your family walk all over you," Sarah said firmly. "They've been taking advantage of your generosity for years, and now they've crossed a line that should never be crossed. What am I supposed to do? The trip is already paid for. If I make a fuss, I'll just be seen as the difficult one as usual." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "Don't let them get away with this. You planned this trip. You paid for it. The reservations are in your name, right?" "Yes. Everything was booked through my travel agent under my name." "Then you still have control over those reservations," Sarah pointed out. "They can't just decide to remove you without your cooperation." A spark ignited within my mind. "You're right. The bookings are all in my name. I'm the primary contact for everything." "Exactly," Sarah said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm not saying you should cancel everything, because that might be too harsh, but maybe there are some adjustments that could be made." We talked for another hour, exploring various options. By the time we hung up, my tears had dried, and a plan was taking shape. I wouldn't cancel the trip entirely. That would be too vindictive. But I would ensure that the luxury experience I had planned and paid for was significantly altered. The next morning, I called my travel agent, Melissa, who had helped me plan every detail. I explained the situation, leaving out some of the more painful details to maintain professionalism. "I need to make some changes to the Dubai booking," I said once the pleasantries were out of the way. "Unfortunately, I will not be joining the trip, and we need to adjust the reservations accordingly." "I'm sorry to hear that, Alexandra," Melissa replied, sounding genuinely disappointed for me. "What kind of changes do you have in mind?" "First, I need to change the flight bookings. Instead of first class on Emirates, I would like to switch everyone to economy class." "That's quite a downgrade," Melissa noted. "Are you sure?" "Positive," I confirmed. "Also, I need to cancel the reservation at the Burj Al Arab. Instead, please book 2 standard rooms at the City Seasons Hotel." "It's in Dera, I believe," Melissa pointed out. "That's on the other side of the city from all the attractions you had planned to visit. And it's a 3-star hotel, not the luxury experience you were aiming for." "That's fine," I assured her. "I also need to cancel all the private tours and experiences I had booked. The desert dinner, the yacht cruise, the VIP access at the Burj Khalifa, all of it." "Alexandra," Melissa said cautiously, "these changes will significantly alter the trip experience. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do?" "I am," I said firmly. "My circumstances have changed, and these adjustments are necessary. Please also cancel the airport transfers and the personal shopping experience." Melissa sighed, but began making notes. "What about basic transportation around Dubai? Do you want me to arrange anything for them?" I considered this. I didn't want to strand my family completely in an unfamiliar city. That would be cruel and potentially dangerous. "Please arrange for a basic tour package, something that includes transportation to the main attractions, but without any VIP elements or private guides." "I can do that," she confirmed. "Will you be rebooking your portion of the trip for a later date? The refund for the downgraded elements could be applied to a solo trip for you." This was something I had already considered. "Yes, I've been thinking about visiting the Maldives. Could you see what kind of upgrade I could get for a one-person trip with the difference from these changes?" "The Maldives is beautiful," Melissa said, her tone warming. "I'd be happy to put together some options for you. With the difference from downgrading the Dubai trip, you could have a very luxurious experience there." We spent the next hour going through all the details, canceling, rebooking, reallocating funds. When we were finished, the Dubai trip had been transformed from a first-class luxury experience to a basic international vacation. Meanwhile, I had secured myself a week at an overwater bungalow in the Maldives with private butler service, daily spa treatments, and gourmet dining included. "All the changes have been processed," Melissa confirmed. "The new itineraries will be emailed to you shortly. Do you want me to send the updated Dubai itinerary to your family members directly? No, I decided after a moment of consideration. I will handle communicating the changes to them. But I had no intention of doing so. Let them discover the truth when they arrived at the airport, expecting first-class treatment and champagne, only to be directed to the economy check-in desk. Let them realize what had happened when they arrived in Dubai and were taken to a basic hotel miles from the attractions instead of one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. Part of me felt guilty about the deception, particularly where my mother was concerned. But then I remembered her silence. As my father informed me, I was being removed from the trip I had paid for. Her unwillingness to stand up for me, even in this extreme situation. The guilt faded, replaced by a sense of fierce justice. I wasn't canceling their trip. They would still get to go to Dubai, still get to see the sights and experience a new country together. They just wouldn't be doing it in the lavish style I had originally planned. The difference would go toward my own well-deserved revenge vacation, a small compensation for the hurt they had caused me. As I hung up with Melissa, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family's unfair treatment. It wasn't a perfect solution, and I knew there would be fallout. But at that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care. They had made their choice, and now I had made mine. The day of the Dubai trip arrived. I hadn't spoken to any of my family members since that fateful evening when I was removed from the trip. My father had called once, leaving a message about finalizing the financial arrangements for my portion of the trip cost, but I hadn't returned his call. My mother had texted a few times, bland messages that carefully avoided mentioning the elephant in the room. Michael hadn't reached out at all. I knew exactly when their flight was scheduled to depart, and I imagined them arriving at the airport, dressed in their best, expecting to be ushered into the first-class lounge for champagne and gourmet snacks. Instead, they would be directed to the economy check-in line, standing with the masses, their boarding passes, showing seats at the back of the plane, rather than the spacious first-class pods I had originally booked. I was sitting at my desk at work, pretending to focus on a spreadsheet while actually watching the clock when my phone rang. It was my father. I contemplated not answering, but decided it was time to face the music. "Hello, Dad," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Alexandra, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger. "We're at the airport, and they're telling us we have economy tickets, not first class. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied calmly. "I made some adjustments to the reservations." There was a stunned silence. Then my father exploded. "You did what? How dare you change the arrangements without telling us? We look like fools standing here. The check-in agent is looking at us like we're trying to scam our way into first class." "I'm sorry you're embarrassed," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But as you said, Dad, gifts once given belong to the recipient. You decided to change who was going on this trip, and I decided to change what kind of trip it would be." "This is completely unacceptable," he sputtered. "We had an agreement." "Did we?" I countered. "I don't recall agreeing to be kicked off my own trip. I don't recall agreeing to have my gift redistributed to someone who, until recently, was a stranger to our family." "Is this about money?" he demanded. "Because if it is, we can discuss increasing the amount we pay you back." "It's not about money, Dad. It's about respect. It's about appreciation for what I tried to do for our family. It's about decades of being treated as less important than Michael, culminating in being told that his girlfriend deserves my place on a trip I paid for more than I do." I could hear my mother in the background, asking what was happening. I heard my father's muffled explanation, then her gasp of surprise. "Alexandra!" Mom's voice came through the phone, apparently having taken it from my father. "Sweetheart, please. This is our anniversary trip. Can't we work this out?" "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, genuinely regretful that she was caught in the middle of this. "But the decision has been made. Just like the decision to remove me from the trip was made. You are still going to Dubai. You will still see all the sights. It just won't be the luxury experience I had originally planned." "But," she began, only to be cut off as my father apparently took the phone back. "You listen to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You fix this right now, or there will be serious consequences for your relationship with this family." "I think those consequences already happened," Dad, when you decided Natalie was more deserving of my place than I was. Enjoy economy class. I hear the middle seats are particularly comfortable. I hung up. My heart was racing, but a powerful sense of satisfaction flowed through me. I had expected to feel guilty, but instead I felt utterly empowered. For once, I had refused to be the family doormat. Over the next few days, the messages rolled in as each new adjustment was discovered. Michael texted furiously when they arrived at the hotel in Dara, far from the glamorous downtown Dubai they had expected. What the hell, Alex? This hotel is barely 3 stars, and it's in the middle of nowhere. The rooms are tiny, and there's no view. How could you do this to us? I didn't respond. My mother called when they discovered all the special experiences had been cancelled. Her voice was tearful as she left a message. Alexandra, I understand you're hurt, but this was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. The desert dinner I was so looking forward to is cancelled. The private yacht cruise is gone. Everything special has been removed. Please call me back. We need to talk about this. I did not return her call. Natalie, predictably, took to social media to express her displeasure, though she was careful not to mention me directly. Her Instagram posts, which had started out enthusiastic about her dream trip to Dubai, quickly devolved into thinly veiled complaints. Not everything is as glamorous as it seems on social media, she wrote beneath a photo of their basic hotel room. But we're making the best of it. Hashtag expectation versus reality. Hashtag travel fails. Another post showed them in the regular observation deck line at the Burj Khalifa, which I knew would mean hours of waiting instead of the immediate access the VIP tickets would have provided. 3-hour wait just to get to the elevator. Someone didn't plan this very well. Hashtag exhausted. Hashtag not worth it. The most satisfying message came 4 days into their trip. A voicemail from my father that represented a significant shift in tone from his previous anger. Alexandra, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I think I owe you an apology. We didn't realize the extent of what you had planned for this trip. The travel agency showed us the original itinerary when we tried to rebook some of the experiences. I had no idea you had invested so much into making this special. He paused, and I could hear him clearing his throat. What we did was wrong. I see that now. Taking your place on this trip was unfair, especially after all you did to plan it. I should have considered your feelings more carefully. I hope when we return, we can sit down and talk about this. I want to make things right. I saved that message, but still didn't call back. I wanted them to sit with their actions for a while longer. The most unexpected development came in the form of a private message from my mother on the 5th day of their trip. It was longer and more heartfelt than anything she had communicated to me in years. Alexandra, it began, I need to tell you how sorry I am, not just for this trip situation, but for years of standing by while your father favored Michael. I have always been too afraid to stand up to him, too worried about rocking the boat. But seeing how hurt you are, how justifiably angry, has made me realize that my silence has been a form of betrayal, too. I want you to know that Michael and Natalie have been fighting constantly on this trip. The stress of the downgraded accommodations, the long waits for attractions, the lack of special treatment Natalie expected has revealed cracks in their relationship that I suspect were always there. Your father is beginning to see Natalie's true colors as well. She has been complaining nonstop and blaming everyone else for the disappointments. I know this does not excuse what we did to you, but I thought you should know that your absence has been keenly felt. This trip was your vision, your gift, and without you here to share it, it feels hollow. When we return, I hope we can begin to repair our relationship. I have a lot of making up to do and a lot of changes to make in how I stand up for you in the future. That message brought tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of profound validation. My mother had finally seen what I had been experiencing for years. It was a small step, but a profoundly significant one. The final update came from Michael, of all people, on the last day of their trip. His message was brief, but spoke volumes. You were right about Natalie. I'm sorry. From social media, I pieced together that Natalie had thrown a tantrum when Michael refused to buy her an expensive handbag at the Dubai Mall, accusing him of being cheap and ruining her once-in-a-lifetime trip. Apparently, the argument had escalated to the point where my parents had to intervene. And in the process, some ugly truths about Natalie's motivations for being with Michael had finally come to light. While they were in Dubai having their considerably less luxurious vacation, I was enjoying my own solitude in the Maldives. My overwater bungalow was everything I had dreamed of, with crystal clear waters beneath my private deck and spectacular sunsets, viewed from my personal infinity pool. The staff treated me like royalty, remembering my name and preferences from day one. Each morning, I awoke to breakfast delivered by boat to my villa. Each evening, I dined on fresh seafood under the stars. I posted exactly one photo on social media during my trip, a shot of my feet propped up on the deck railing, the turquoise water stretching to the horizon, with the simple caption, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself. #self-care, #Maldives." I knew my family would see it. I knew they would understand. And for once, I didn't care what they thought about my choices. When I returned from the Maldives, tanned, rested, and with a new sense of self-respect, I found several messages waiting for me. My family had been back from Dubai for a few days, and it seemed they were eager to talk. I took my time responding, allowing myself the space to process my feelings and decide how I wanted to move forward. Eventually, I agreed to meet my father for coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I was surprised to find him already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He stood when he saw me, an automatic military courtesy that felt strangely formal given our relationship. "Alexandra," he said, pulling out my chair. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded and sat down, waiting for him to speak. He had asked for this meeting. The burden of beginning was on him. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion. What we did with the Dubai trip was wrong. I see that now." "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had been burning in me for weeks. Why did you think it was acceptable to take something I had worked so hard for and give it to someone else? He sighed heavily. "I could give you excuses about wanting to welcome Natalie into the family, about thinking you would understand because you're always so capable and independent. But the truth is simpler and harder to admit. I haven't been fair to you for a very long time." He looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly between his hands. "I have always expected more from you than from Michael. When you succeeded, I took it for granted. When you gave, I accepted without proper gratitude. I held you to a higher standard and then resented you for meeting it." His admission stunned me. I had always sensed this dynamic, but I never expected him to acknowledge it, to articulate it with such raw honesty. "The Dubai trip," he continued, "was just the most egregious example of a pattern that has existed since you were children. I favored Michael because he struggled, because he needed more support. But in doing so, I failed to appreciate the daughter who never gave me cause for worry, who always exceeded expectations." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. "Do you know how much it hurt when you said Natalie deserved to go more than I did? After all I had done to create that experience for our family." "I do now," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately or maybe ever, but I want you to know that I see what I have done, and I am committed to changing. Your mother and I have had many long conversations about this since we returned. She has helped me see things I was blind to before." We talked for over 2 hours, covering years of accumulated hurts and misunderstandings. It wasn't a magical resolution, not a Hollywood moment where all was instantly forgiven, but it was a beginning, a foundation upon which we could potentially build a healthier relationship. As for Michael, the Dubai trip had indeed been a rude awakening. Natalie's true colors had shown themselves vividly under the stress of disappointment. Her complaints about the hotel, the long lines, the lack of VIP treatment had revealed a materialism and entitlement that could no longer be ignored. Their constant fighting had culminated in that public argument at the Dubai Mall that left my mother in tears and my father seething with anger. 2 weeks after their return, Michael ended the engagement. Natalie, predictably, did not take it well. She demanded to keep the ring, threatened to tell everyone Michael was abusive, he wasn't, and finally resorted to calling me, bizarrely claiming that I owed her compensation for ruining her trip. I listened to her rant for precisely 1 minute before cutting her off. "Natalie, this conversation is over. Do not contact me or my family again. I blocked her number and social media accounts immediately afterward. My relationship with my mother improved more quickly than the one with my father. She reached out regularly, not just with superficial check-ins, but with genuine interest in my life and thoughts. She began standing up to my father on small issues, finding her voice after decades of deferring to him. It was a slow process, but I could see her making an effort to change patterns that had been established over 40 years of marriage. Michael and I had the most complicated road to recovery. He had been raised to expect preferential treatment, to believe his needs and wants should come before mine. Breaking that mindset was not easy for either of us. We had several false starts, conversations that devolved into old accusations and defenses. But gradually, as he processed the lessons from his relationship with Natalie and saw the changes our parents were making, he began to shift his perspective. 6 months after the Dubai fiasco, he invited me to dinner and offered a genuine apology, not just for the trip, but for years of accepting advantages at my expense. "I never thanked you for helping with my rent last year," he admitted, "or for any of the other times you've bailed me out. I took it for granted that you would always be there to help, without ever considering how I could support you in return." As for me, the entire experience was transformative. I learned to set clear boundaries with my family, to assert my needs and expect them to be respected. I stopped automatically saying yes to requests for financial help and started evaluating each situation on its merits. Sometimes I still said yes, but it was a choice now, not a foregone conclusion. I also began to examine my own patterns of people-pleasing and seeking validation through sacrifice. With the help of a therapist, I explored why I'd been so willing to spend enormous sums of money and effort to create perfect experiences for people who often showed little appreciation. I learned to value myself enough to expect reciprocity in my relationships, both within my family and beyond. The Dubai trip that never was became a turning point in our family dynamic. It forced issues that had simmered beneath the surface for decades to finally boil over, creating an opportunity for honest conversation and real change. It was painful, messy, and at times deeply hurtful, but ultimately necessary for all of us to grow. My father still occasionally slips into old patterns of favoring Michael or taking me for granted. My mother sometimes falls back into her peacekeeper role rather than standing firm. Michael has moments of entitlement that echo our childhood dynamic, and I still find myself tempted to overextend myself to earn their approval. But now we catch ourselves and each other. We talk about these patterns openly instead of pretending they don't exist. For my parents' 41st anniversary, we took a much more modest trip together, a long weekend at a lakeside cabin a few hours from their home. We cooked meals together, played board games, and had conversations that would have been impossible a year earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic in a way the Dubai trip never could have been. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, know that change is possible. But it requires courage, honesty, and often a catalyst that forces everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to protect yourself and establish healthy boundaries. It doesn't mean you don't love your family. It means you finally love yourself enough to expect better treatment.